Hello, thanks for coming everyone today. I'm Kelly. I'll be talking to you today about beetles and people. And I did my BSc and MRes at Nottingham Trent University. I did environmental conservation and global food security. And I was supposed to have finished my PhD by now, but I'm hanging on in there due to a few delays, and I'm doing that with the University of Reading and Rothamsted Research. So I've loved all invertebrates, but particularly beetles since I was little. And I've used them in my studies, and I specialize in agricultural beetles. But I am preaching to the converted today. I'm sure that you wouldn't be here listening to me if you weren't at least a little bit interested in beetles. But I'm going to talk to you today more about the general connection of humans and beetles. And where best to start a story than at the very beginning. So in the dawns of human civilizations, obviously we were a lot more connected to the land. We lived off the land, we weren't apart from it. Like we've got a lot of intermediaries in today's society, but people live directly on the land. And they didn't have the scientific knowledge of ecology to guide them in mysterious happenings such as the sun rising, the movement of the tides, the shape of the lands, and what their fellow denizens of the earth were up to. So they just observed nature and made their own conclusions about what was going on based on what they saw. And they saw the awesomeness of beetles right from the beginning. So the Egyptians, I'm sure many of you will know, Khepri, who is depicted as being often a beetle or a beetle-headed man. And he was responsible for making the sun rise every day. And that was part of the creation myth of the Egyptians, because they believed that when the sun began on Earth. And this was based on the scarab beetles. Now, these are dung beetles that roll bowls of dung, and they lay their eggs in them underground, and the eggs hatch out and make new beetles, obviously. But the Egyptians only saw them roll in the balls of dung, which kind of looked like the sun rolling across the sky to them, it must have done. And also, they didn't know that there was actually female dung beetles. So they thought that the act of the beetle putting the eggs into the ball made them grow. So it was perhaps this kind of death and rebirth thing. And in the previous slide, you saw the heart stones that they used to use as grave goods, because the heart was the seat of the soul in Egyptian times. And this was to do with guiding the soul into the afterlife. The scarabs were the custodians of the souls. But similarly, the Aksak was a creator according to the Indian Charo tribe. And this was a dung beetle that they thought shaped the first men and women out of clay as they shaped the balls of dung. And a different kind of beetle was the diving beetle. And the Cherokee tribes thought that Dayunsi made the land. So in the beginning, the Cherokee thought that the sky was made of stone, and all there was underneath the sky was a vast ocean. And the beetle, the water beetle, dove down to see what was at the bottom of the ocean and found the mud and brought it up and shaped the land. And there was a similar creation story from the Indian Garo tribe, that the diving beetle was the creator of the land, but also the sky, because diving beetles can fly as well. So you can see that they thought the beetles were pretty awesome in the habits. Throughout the ages, we've had some more kind of thoughts on people observing nature in folklore. So one of the most famous one is the Death's Watch beetle. I don't know if it was in the old houses. they used to have the beetles that lived in all the wood that was in old houses, like rotting wood eating them. And you could hear them ticking, like a clicking noise as they tapped in the wood. And obviously on the deaf side visual, it was very quiet, people waiting, just this ticking as if a ticking clock was ticking down. And in the 1600s, the alchemists actually thought that you could make gold using the philosopher's stone. And one of the ingredients that they put forward to make the philosopher's stone, and hence gold, was the golden scarabs. So they thought that was pretty important for that. What I'm particularly familiar with, being a Derbyshire lass, is rain beetles. I don't know if attendees of the talk know this folklore, that if you see a ground beetle running across your path, if you stamp on it, it makes it rain the next day. Various different versions of that tale that I've heard, but I think it's just a Midlands thing. You can correct me in the chat if you like. The stag beetle in the center of the screen there, that's particularly notorious. I mean, it looks pretty formidable with its big mandibles. They can't actually do any damage to humans, but as you can imagine, people associated the stag beetle with the devil because of the horns. They used to think they were so evil that they used these to carry burning coals and set houses on fire with the coals. Probably just human accident that, and then they just blamed the beetles, but there you go. In the New Forest, people called the stag beetle devil's imp, and they thought it arrived to ruin the corn harvest. So when they saw the stag beetles, they stoned them. They threw stones at them, save the harvest. But it wasn't all bad. In northern France, carrying a stag beetle apparently brought you wealth. A Romanian belief said that if you wear the horns of the stag beetle, you'd ward off the evil eye. And strangely, if you hang a stag beetle around a child's neck, it can ward off illnesses. So the ladybirds, now I never knew this until I was doing a bit of research for the talk. They got the name from Our Lady, the Virgin Mary. Different languages have a different variation on this. So in German, it's Marienkäfer, so Marian's bug. And the 7 spots of the famous 7-spot ladybird are meant to be the 7 joys and 7 sorrows of Mary. Not up on my Christian theology, so I don't know what they are. But the glowworm's another famous one, a lot in literature, and particularly in Asian literature, where you get the other, they're not the same ones as we get in the UK, but they're quite famous. I haven't got much time to go into literature today. I am a big bookworm, no pun intended, but you could do an entire talk on bugs in literature. Just to say that the glowworm is actually a beetle. It's the male there that you can see with the typical elytra, and the female has got reduced wings and is just a worm shape, and she's the one that glows. And finally on this screen, we've got the rhinoceros beetle. In Japan, they're called kabuto mushi, and mushi is Japanese for insect. I may be pronouncing it entirely wrong. Kabuto is Japanese for helmet, and that's referring to, they look quite similar to the samurai helmets. So these were quite famous, and they used them as fighting beetles in Japan. And they saw the beauty in the beetles as well. So this Tanemushi, the jewel beetle shrine in the top corner there, is a 7th century temple, and it was shingled with 9,000 iridescent beetle horns. They're very beautiful. Beetle wing art was a big thing traditionally in Thailand, Myanmar, India, China, and Japan. And we had such lovely dresses as these, made all with beautiful beetles' wings. And I said I won't be going into the literature, but I do have to give an honourable mention to A.A. Milne's Forgiven, featuring Alexander Beetle. And this was a little boy who collected a beetle and then his maid let it out, which leads me into my next slide, So in the Victorian era, there was a big movement on beetle collecting. And the reason this is because one, they're quite apparent in the environment, so you can track them quite easily. And the other is that they preserve really well, so we can have these magnificent collections of beetles. So the collection up in the corner there was from Alfred Russel Wallace, and this was collected over 8 years. By his own count, 83,200 beetles he collected during the making of his 1869 book. That was including 2,000 species new to science at that time, so he was a great collector. Charles Darwin actually is said to have become a naturalist by the way of beetle collecting. This was one of his first passions. And there is a story, I wasn't able to corroborate the truth of it, there's various accounts, that he was so enthusiastic, he had a beetle in each hand, and then he saw another interesting beetle, so he popped one in his mouth, and it turned out to be a bombardier beetle that shoots acid as a defense, and it made a horrible taste in his mouth and he had to spit it out. So he lost 2 of the 3 beetles. But that may be people making that. But that could happen. So in the modern day, we still appreciate the aesthetics of art, and just a shameless plug by my own picture of a Prussian plate jaw in the corner there. There's actually the living jaw. You can see that beetle on a person's finger there. That's actually alive. In Mexico, they're made into living brooches because these beetles are very sedentary and will just sit where they're put. They actually have the living beetle with the decorations on them, which I feel is a little cruel, but I don't really know much about it. Japanese rhinoceros beetles are very popular in anime and manga and in adverts and films, based on what I told you in the slide previously on the kind of mythology around them. And they're actually a popular pet, and you can buy them in pet stores in Asia. And luckily for me, for my 2 little nephews, hello, you can buy a lot more toys, books for children now based on natural history of beetles. So I get a lot of those. So those connections, oh, I've missed a slide out here, I'm jumping ahead. So moving on to the more modern uses of them, they've been used to make these kind of suspension systems inspired by beetles for military vehicles, the new paints. The bombardier beetle that I mentioned a bit ago, it has a spray was inspired by that, a fine mist spray technology. A desert beetle has inspired a self-filling water bottle. And living beetles are now used as cyborgs for military operations and like going into areas that people can't. They're actually able to manipulate the sensors of the beetle so that they can direct them. They can actually make the wings move and fly in different directions, and they can put little cameras on them now. It's quite amazing. So from all those connections, we've learned a lot about beetles, but what is a beetle? So the characteristics of beetles, the elytra, so those are the wing cases on the back of the beetle there that are often very beautiful. They have usually, most of the time, they have flight capable wings underneath. So the actual scientific name of Coleoptera comes from the Greek koleos, meaning sheath, and pteron, meaning wing, so sheath wing. And then we've got the other kind of definition of a beetle, which is that they have chewing mouth parts, mandibles. Unlike true bugs that have piercing mouth parts, they actually chew the food. And this is the root of the word beetle, from the Old English for bitella, bite. And another name for beetles is chafers, like cockchafer grubs. That's from the Proto-Germanic, and they call them Käfer in Germany. And the last one, this from my project, it's a Cabbage life cycle. The third attribute of beetles is that they have a complete metamorphosis. So the adults don't look like the larvae. The larvae are these kind of crawling. This is a typical kind of looking beetle larva. They go from eggs to larvae in instars, and then they come across and they turn into pupa, and then the adult beetle, which can look very, very different. And often most of the life cycle is spent as a beetle, because these are the growth stages where they are growing from the tiny egg into the adult. That takes the most time. Sometimes the adults are very short-lived compared to the larvae. So also there's so many species of beetles, and this quote at the top there is incorrectly attributed to a number of people, but it was actually a British scientific polymath. And this was in response to someone asking what you could learn about God from natural history. And he said that God must have an inordinate fondness for beetles because there's that much of a variety of them. And I've included some of the most notable ones there, the most unusual ones, just to give you a flavor, but it was hard for me to pick the most unusual beetles. There are so many to choose from. So a first poll, if we can get that initiated, please. So what, of all described species, what percentage do you think are beetles of all described species? So that's vertebrates, that's plants and animals as well. So what percentage of those do you think are actually beetles?
The poll is anonymous, so we can't see who's putting what. If you've got no idea, still have a guess. We'll give you another 7 seconds. So see, we've got quite a few of you in already. 2, 1. My screen's not the right size. There we go. All right, so that's your results, Kelly.
Right, okay. So everyone thinks that, well, most people think it's 22%, so I'll stop sharing those results. Is that still popping up on everyone's screen, or is that gone now? Okay. That slide should be going now. Right, okay. Well, the majority of you is actually right. So it is quite astounding that the majority, the largest chunk of described species actually belongs to beetles. And that's around 400,000 species. And of all described insects, it's almost 40%. But I will say this is biased, and a lot of people who are into the flies or Diptera and the wasps will dispute this fact because, but because of those kind of the early interest in beetle collection and the ease of beetle collection, they are probably over-described compared to other orders, but still, there is an amazing variety. So my next thing is, although we all historically have enjoyed beetles, as I've covered, they're not in a good state at the moment. And you will see in the media furor, this was a couple of years back, on the insect Armageddon. Quite alarming stuff. I mean, the media do pick up on things a little bit cherry picking, but there was something to be concerned about. This is from the paper that spawns that new thing. A lot of papers have covered the insect declines, not just this one, but this was one that the media had picked up on. And you can see those first 4 columns there relate to beetles. And really alarmingly, the dung beetles aren't doing very well in the studies that they had looked at. A lot of them are vulnerable and endangered. And these are very necessary for our ecosystems, hence the alarm. And so why is this happening? This is a recent paper that was put out about the insect decline, showing death by 1,000 cuts, and that's really it. If you think of all the ecosystems that humans have had an impact on, it's everywhere. We've altered everything. So it's having impacts in a million different places. Climate change is a big one, the population growth, the need for more food, and this kind of agriculture is one of the biggest ones. because of the sheer land that it takes up, and the way that they have to control pests in those lands means that insects are heavily hit in those areas. So this hurricane plot, I appreciate, I look at graphs all the time being a student, but this is a little bit hard to read, so let me take you through it. These dark blue bits on the left there, they are a kind of negative change. So the whole plot is change over time. And the green bits, they are positive change. So in the instance of climate change, some of this change can be positive because climate changing can actually benefit some species, particularly those ones in that can move to different climatic areas. Some of that is beneficial, some insect species, particularly generalists. But there's negative effects there. But if you see this big negative bar at the top, that's intensive management of agricultural land, and that's the impact on species population change in the UK. So that's a massive impact. So do we know from this poll how much of the UK's land, the terrestrial land, is classified as agriculture or farmed land? Have a guess at that. Are we doing the poll? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, please start voting. Again, it is anonymous. Sorry, I was trying to use two screens and turns out I'm not as technical as I thought I was. Yeah, we'll just give you another 10 seconds. So if you haven't got your vote in, try and get it in quick. Okay, another 3 seconds. I think everyone's voted now, so I'll end that. And
okay. Yep. Well, we've got a very knowledgeable crowd today. When it lets me go to the right. Just get out of that. So yes, you're all very right. Around 70% of the UK's land is farmland. And that was a statistic that actually got me into agricultural entomology, because I wanted with my work to have the most impact that I could. And knowing that that much of the UK land is farmland meant that I could have the most impact with beetle conservation, because I started out in conservation. So you can see here the industrial revolution, and then we moved to the agricultural revolution, and the kind of change from our traditional farming systems. Around World War II, we imported a lot of goods, and after the World War was when we had these post-war productivist policies where a lot of the hedgerows was ripped out, a lot of moorland was improved, unimproved grassland was made over to productive land. And these were the natural areas that wildlife was thriving in, despite mankind kind of billowing our landscape. And these areas were being ripped up for agricultural productivity. So that had a great impact. And since then, we've had agri-environment schemes come in to try and ameliorate these effects. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But there is a reason that we do have to use such things as pesticide in farmland. And I would say we've altered the natural ecosystems so that such things as pests that are adapted to have a very quick generation time, because when they, evolutionarily speaking, when they encounter a food resource, they just reproduce exponentially and make huge numbers to exploit that food resource. And if you think of a crop, that's a massive resource. So they're just going to reproduce and reproduce quicker than you can almost manage them, especially in the cases of these particular pests. So the boll weevil is a historic pest that was on cotton crops. And the United States estimates that since it was in the 1890s, it's cost cotton producers around 13 billion in loss. And in recent times, it costs them around $300 million per year. The other one here from America is the Colorado potato beetle. That is that feeds on the foliage and destroys the plants, as you can see. It's a beautiful beetle, but yeah, it's not all that good for agriculture. And interesting side note historically is that they hated it that much. During World War II, it was considered as a bioweapon. They actually ran a test in Germany to see if they could use it to destroy the enemy's crops. Never turned out, as far as I know, but yeah. More from the UK is bark beetles, and they were responsible for the spread of Dutch elm disease. So they carried the disease from tree to tree. That's why only very large trees are affected, because the bark beetles are only interested in trees where they have the habitat that's big enough to get them and they can burrow under the bark. One that we're working on a lot at Rothamsted is the cabbage stem flea beetle. That's causing massive losses at the moment to oilseed rape crops, and we're looking into different methods of control for that, obviously, because there's a lot of problem with pesticides lately. I'm not going to get into that today, but yeah. Luckily, beetles aren't all bad. As I've covered before, they are beautiful, but they do provide services in farmland to help us. And luckily, one of the best ones of these is pest control. So beetles do eat pests, including other beetles. So notably, they can control the Colorado potato beetle. I'll tell you a bit more about that as we go. Pollination, it's not all bees. Beetles actually help too. Nutrient cycling, I've talked about the dung beetles from the very beginning. They are essential to nutrient cycling, taking down dead animals and animal dung, improving the soil structure and helping with water retention, so helping with flooding too, they're great. They support other species of conservation concerns, so such species as seal bunting, corn bunting, yellow hammer there, skylark, grey partridge. These all eat invertebrates as adults, but particularly, but some of them don't eat them as adults, sorry. Yellow hammers, I know, are granivores. But particularly they're important when they're raising the young, because the young birds need a high protein source. So this is particularly important in farmland and beetle provides. So culture and education, it's very important to get people engaged with farmland, and one of the things they can do is look at the beetles in the farmland. That's quite interesting. And one thing that's coming out more and more with entomophagy is the eating of beetles. So it's direct productivity of the ecosystems. We can have beetles as food for humans and feed for animals. So as food for humans, there's around 344 species used as food of beetles. And this is usually at the larval stage. So they'll just really of it, like mealworms, and the rhinoceros beetle are commonly eaten. And this isn't new. People have eaten them throughout history. We moved away from it to Europe, but we're kind of moving back to it because it's very good for the environment. You don't need the same kind of facilities for keeping livestock when they're tiny and they don't really perceive being contained so much. It's a lot less cruel as well. So, and recent study by the WWF said that insect protein in pig and poultry feed could cut UK soya imports by 1/5, and that would help with deforestation around the world. So they're also good for that. And so we now move on to my work. So this is a kind of montage of all the things that I do with beetles. I go out in the field, I collect the beetles. I'm working, as I said earlier, with the University of Reading and Rothamsted Research. And I'm looking at the ways that beneficial beetles can help us in farmland. So very sadly, I love beetles a lot. You may have noticed that. But I have to kill them on a daily basis, and I have to look at them because you can't get a live beetle under a scope. It's very difficult to tell what they've been doing. So I do have to kill them, but I'll save more in the long run, I promise. And here is a completely non-staged shot of me looking down the scope at beetles. So I look at Cabbage beetles. These are ground beetles that I mentioned earlier, the rain beetles that you'll see running across your path on a sunny day. And in farmland, these eat a range of pests in the crop area, both invertebrate pests such as aphids, caterpillars, slugs, snails, Colorado potato beetle there. You can just read the slide. I'm not going to read out the slide to you. This is ones that I've had for farmers before. But a lot of people don't realize they actually eat weed seeds as well. So if you think of seeds, we eat seeds ourselves. So we know that they are quite good nutritional value. They're full of proteins, full of fats. And so, of course, beetles are going to eat them too. So carrots eat those too. And remove competition from the crop in that way. And that we can help to boost the numbers of Cabbage beetles in farmland so that they're able to carry out these pest control services. So we can use fallow areas, so not having crop in some fields sometimes and having some more resources that will boost the Cabbage in those areas. Margins, flower-rich margins, particularly these seed mixers, so that the Cabbage can have an area of shelter next to the crop. So in a lot of farmland that I showed you, it's very intensively managed, and there's not these natural areas that the Cabbage need to thrive. So they need areas to shelter, they need alternative food sources throughout the year. And if we provide these natural areas right next to the crops, they can move out from those areas when the pests are in the crop to eat the pests and then move back into them for hibernation, because the beetles do hibernate. So similarly, the hedgerows and ponds and such are natural areas for them to have alternative food and to shelter, but also move around the farm. So these are like corridors through these kind of, I mean, if you think of a ploughed field, it's barren. A beetle doesn't want to run across this kind of open space because it's fearing that birds will come down and eat it. So having these corridors gives them a safe kind of network to move around the farm. Also, taking field corners out of management and reducing grazing gives you a nice sward. So that's what we say is a sward, is the kind of level of tussocky grasses within a grazing area. And having these tussocky grasses and different species of grasses and broadleaves within a grazing area, more resources for beetles and more areas for them to shelter, because they really like tussocky grasses. It's one of these things you can do, an activity in the winter. You can go out and you can part and see the overwintering beetles in it. So recommend that one. So what I work on is particularly where to put them. So if you've got a field, what the current thinking is that this activity of the beetles will be highest right next to the edges and right next to the natural habitats, because they come so far into the field, and then it kind of peters off. You get to the field center and there would be low activity in the center. So if we divide up larger fields by hedges, or even just a beetle bank is a raised area of banked soil, and you seed it with wildflowers or grass mix. You leave one end open so that the tractor can get through. But having a bank means there's a different kind of microclimate on each side. And in the middle of the field, as you can see there on the slides, makes it so that the beetles will penetrate more to the center of the crops and carry out the pest control there. That's the current thinking, but we have to make sure that this actually works in practice. So we're in the process of doing experiments to kind of prove that that is actually effective. Another thing to consider is at the farm scale, they have population movements. and they move to different fields according to the resources. So the different crops will have different resources within them, different pests, different weeds. And the seasonal movements, I mentioned hibernation there. The carabid beetles I work with hibernate, but they also estivate, which is like hibernation, but in the summer. So in the winter, it's too cold to move. In the summer, it's too hot for them to move. There's no resources, nothing's moving around. It's too dry. So often they will estivate in the middle of the summer. And different carabids move in different ways. Some of them are really good flyers. Some of them, the wings almost disappear through evolution, and they just walk. And some of them will actually cross open areas. Some of them, like those, habitat corridors. So I'm investigating which species need which kind of interventions in which areas, and that's what I'm working on. But as scientists, what we need is for people to actually practice what we have investigated. So it's no good me doing all this science if no one's going to put it into practice. So one of the big things about our job as scientists is trying to get it out there to the practitioners, which is in my case, farmers. So I've done outreach. This is me in the top corner there talking to farmers when I was still allowed to get them in a room. I look forward to being able to do that again. And this is me more recently at the cereals event, where I'm talking to farmers out in the open air, and I'd like to take my beetle Megan along with me. She's really, oh, she's wandered off now. I was going to grab her to show you. She's wandered off. I'll see if I can get her later. And I take my pin specimens, and it's always quite popular with the farmers to see the beetles there. What I kind of think is when I do my pitfall trapping in the field, you saw all those pictures of me and my colleagues at trapping, I get like pint glasses half full of carabids. And you just think, if there's that many beetles in the crop area, they really have to be eating quite a lot. And if you can see, I've just managed to get Megan there. This is Megan, my beetle. She comes out and does the outreach event with me because she is a carabid beetle. And she's actually Nigerian, though. We don't get them quite this big in the UK, but she eats snails. So there we go. Back in the cage, Megan. So yeah, that's a big factor, actually finding out how we can get farmers to implement these measures. So for this purpose, I wanted to know more about farmers' opinions about carabid beetles. So how aware they are of the pest control capacity of farmers, of themselves, no, of beetles, their attitudes to the pest control potential, because there is a risk in implementing pest control without pesticides. They've always done it a certain way, and then you're asking them to do something different. There's a risk there. So how do they perceive this? And what kind of things do they already do that would be beneficial to carabids? What would they be willing to do more of this? And the opportunity and barriers towards monitoring of carabids. So could I get farmers to go out and look at the carabids that they've got on their farms? Give me the information, because then I could, model what's going on in farmland a bit more generally than I am able to do myself. And also it would inform them day to day on their kind of management. So if they put a field margin in, they measure the carabid population before and after, then they see themselves what's happening in the fields. Also, it could provide evidence for agri-environment schemes, because we may be moving towards more evidence-based approaches, but that's a bit of a segue there, sorry. So what did I do? I made a 3-minute animation about carabid beetles, which I will share the link to after the event. I made a quiz to help with carabid ID to see how they perceive the identification of them, and a fact sheet for farms. And I also gave a number of talks. That's me right here, giving a talk to farmers with my slippers on, because I was meant to have in-person workshops, but COVID scuppered all those plans. So I did a number of online talk events, talking to farmers about carabids in farmland. And then I applied the survey to people who would talk to me. So here you can see, you may have to get very close to your screen. But these are 16 different farm management interventions that may have an impact on carabid beetles in farmland. And what I did was ask the farmers how important they thought they were for carabid beetles, because I'd just given them a talk about it too, and how difficult it might be to implement them in farmland. So how difficult they thought it was to implement each of these management types. And the behavioral theory, I won't get into it. So I did a social sciences kind of project for my master's. So I do a bit of social science. But in this theory, if you perceive something as easy to do, and you perceive that something's important to do, that's what you are likely to do. I'm sure you could find examples in your own life. If you think something is easy and you think it's important, of course, you will do it. If something's important, but it's really, really difficult, you might not do it. So bearing in mind the kind of things that those 16 things I've got listed down here that I've been asking the farmers about, these ones in the top right corner. So on this kind of axis, we've got importance going up to very important at the top here. And then we've got perceived ease. So the more easy it is going to the top. So this top right corner is those ones that they think are easy and important. So these margins and buffer strips might be an easy win for me to sell to farmers, to say, because they're already quite in favor of them. They're likely to implement them. Low pesticide use, that is quite important. They know it's important, but they think it's quite hard to do. So if I was thinking of a way to get them to do it more, I try to think of ways to make it easier for them to implement this, or give them more information to make it easier, or you know. Likewise, on the other kind of scale, they don't think that managing ditches is very important, but they think it's very easy. So if I talked to them and said that ditches were actually quite important and could contribute to carabids moving around farms, they might be like, oh yes, I'd quite like to implement that too, because it's quite easy. So you can see here, you can design interventions based on what farmers are willing to do and what we'll preferentially do. One important factor in this is this kind of red dash circle I've got here. These are interventions that occur in the cropped area. So actually in the field area rather than natural areas around the fields. And these ones in the literature, in the scientific literature, are said to be more important because these are where the highest impact on biodiversity occurs. So addressing things in the field area is more likely to have a higher impact and be more significant as a kind of intervention if we can get farmers to do things in this area. So that's where my work is taking me with that. So let's ask you a question that I put on the survey. What do you think the top motivation for farmers is to conserve beetles on their farms? So I told the farmers that they contributed to pest control and they contributed to weed control, but they might also be generally interested in them. Or if they were paid to do it, would that motivate them more? So what do you think? Okay, right. So I thought pretty much the same thing before I did the surveys. So I'll just close that. So you've said a contribution to pest control, and then after that, if they were paid to do it. Let's get the slide up. So it surprised me a lot that the actual top motivation that they said in my survey was that they were generally interested in wildlife. And this is very encouraging. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of farmers, and it is a biased kind of thing. The farmers that I talk to are those farmers who are more engaged, more forward thinking than the general kind of farmers. The ones that engage with scientists are more likely to be open to these kind of ideas. But still, you've got to think of farmers, and you rightly said some of the people in the survey answered about the financial things. So these three end things are about if they supported it financially, if it was evidence for agri-environment schemes, or if it was advised for integrated pest management by an advisor. So that has to do with financial returns. These were the lesser considerations, and you rightly said that pest control was right up there. So they did realise that they were important for pest control and weed control nicely, but I had talked to them about that. So, but I was very encouraged by this wildlife interest. So that is moving quite a lot forwards. Other questions I'll just touch on. It was a long survey, so I'm only like glancing through this for you because I don't want to kill you all by graphs. But they were willing to monitor carabids if they had advice. So if we want them to monitor carabids, we'd have to help them to do so. And the barriers that we could help them to monitor carabids was that they thought that there was lack of training, a lack of time. So we would have to make the monitoring protocol quite quick and easy to do. And the identification tools that they would preferentially use, actually, surprisingly, was a phone app. I thought more people might go for field guides, because I'm a very paper-based person, even though I'm kind of have to deal with technology a lot. I do like my old field guides. But phone apps would be a kind of good intervention in the future. So what next? Work. So it's more going out talking to farmers, producing the materials that we need to persuade them and to help them do this. So this is a carabid ID guide that I just done a paper guide, but I was thinking of adapting this into a phone app to help farmers to identify the common carabid species on farmland. And we will be working with farmers to kind of adapt these tools towards knowing which interventions will be best. So we will be doing some co-design of tools with them. Just to mention, an honourable mention, that I'm not the only person doing this kind of thing, particularly with dung beetles. Sarah Baignon came out with some great statistics that I often use to farmers. I don't think I've used them so far, but she figured out that dung beetles are worth 367 million to the UK cattle industry per year. And putting these kind of prices on dung beetles helps to have a more persuasive argument. And that's one of the things that I want to do for carabid beetles, to try and figure out what kind of levels of predation we're actually seeing in field environments and how much money this could potentially save farmers versus using pesticides. There's also a great resource. The bug farm is Sarah Baignon's enterprise, and she actually does some great bug foods as well. And dung beetles for farmers is a great resource for things that farmers can do to conserve dung beetles. So the original title for this talk, this is me wrapping it up now, so this is my last slide. And just to say that this is my own illustration too, throughout the things I've been kind of plugging my own work. So the original title for this talk was Beetles and People from Beauty to Utility. Dan, who recruited me, thought the shorter title was snappy, and I agree, because I tend to go on a bit. You may be noticing. So when I was a child, I remember what I was interested in with nature was things that had a value, what my parents told me were valuable. So you observe people, you see what they do. So when we would go out walking, we would look for wildflowers that you could eat. And I always was very fascinated with fungi that you could eat as well. And a particular favorite of mine was jay feathers, because my dad told me that you could sell jay feathers to fly fishermen for 50p each. Don't know what they go for nowadays, but I always used to look out for feathers on my walks after that. So this is, as a child, you appreciate things for that kind of value. But it was later that when I was looking at those things, I noticed that the feathers were actually really beautiful. that the beetles that we saw on our walks was really beautiful and interesting. And what did they do and why did they do this? I think it's same with anyone. So you need a reason to look twice at something. You need a reason to turn over. You need a reason to look at a patch of nettles because you don't want to get so, there's so much life in there. So once you actually start looking, you see that these things have value. And that's outside of your use of them. So you start to learn about the natural world, and then you see that these things have inherent value in of themselves. So I've taken you through the kind of awe that we felt about beetles in the beginning, the kind of values that we've seen in them, from the beauty to the usefulness and back again. And that's a reason for conserving them. But there's a lot of argument about putting a price on nature. So we're in essence commodifying them. We're making them into a commodity. And that means that you can buy them. They can be bought. So I think maybe some people will understand a bit about the planning policy in the UK, that when they've done this kind of thing where you can say, oh, if we really need to build somewhere, we can actually put a price on the habitat that we're destroying and then replace it elsewhere. Which is good, because we're in the olden days, we probably would have destroyed it outright without trying to replace it. But there are some things that are irreplaceable, such as ancient woodland. And that hasn't been well represented in planning policy because of that reason, that it can be bought. So there is an argument on the other side there. And I've thought long and hard about it. I actually did an ethics exam on it in undergraduate. So I have considered the arguments from every side, and I have come down on the side of accounting for it. You just have to be careful that you actually account for it properly. So when wildlife in the past has been seen as an externality, so they didn't account for it, they didn't see the effects that they were having on the wildlife, because they didn't really consider that it was a part of the system. So by destroying the hedgerows, they was actually destroying the capability of natural systems to provide natural enemies to help with crop pests. So they didn't understand that in those days, but now we do, and we can account for it. And so we can do better. We've got to just actually make it so that this works as a system. So most farmers do deal in money. You've got to think it's not just a hobby for them. This is their lifestyle. If a crop fails, they go without. They lose the crop, they lose the money. It's not like we get paid. If I make a mistake at work, I come home, I may be a bit sad, but I still get paid. I don't have that. So it helps put in that kind of value, like I said, 367 million for dung beetles. Saying that these things have a value that they can help, helps farmers to be sure that they will, if they give up a productive area for a natural measure, that this will be actually effective. So that's why I spend my time researching not just beetles, which I love going out in the field and but I also need to think about people and how we relate to this, how our needs meet with the needs of the natural systems, because that's the sticking point. Human behavior is the thing that is most modified ecosystems. So human behavior is the thing that could perhaps fix those mistakes. And also we have to make the arguments compelling enough that people who haven't had time or the initiative to go and look at nature actually have a reason to do so. And maybe the next time someone like a farmer goes out and sees a beetle, if they think that it's valuable, maybe they'll just look twice at it and they'll see that it's also beautiful. Thank you.
Cool, thanks for that, Kay. That was awesome. We've got a few questions in the chat. There's a lot of love for Megan the Beetle, obviously. We've got kind of like two main camps here. We've got stuff that's like related to your Cabbage stuff that I want you to feel definitely. And we've got a few dung beetle questions as well. I love dung beetles. I'm quite happy to do those as well, so that's fine. So First of all, there was a question from Lizzie asking, is there a link to share with farming friends to try and get them on board with you in the research? I've popped a load of links from your stuff because you've done loads of blogs and fantastic things. So there's lots of those in there. If there's anything particular you want, we can put that on the email and send that out as well. But there is a lot there. And what I'd recommend to everyone who wants these links, you can actually save the chat. If there's a little 3-dot icon, click on it, save the chat, and you've got all of the links that I've been squirreling away, putting in there that you can look at afterwards, after this has happened. We've got a question from Richard that I thought was quite a nice one. And he asked, who was the audience for the survey on motivation? Was it cereal crop owners or was it a broad range or what?
So I tried to get as many different types of farmers as I could. So I did a broad kind of Twitter recruitment. I also got a lot of agricultural organizations to help me in newsletters, and I did podcasts, things like that to reach as many farmers as I could. And I did get quite a range across all different farm types, but I will say, being in the southeast kind of area and talking to farmers around here, it was mostly arable that was the biggest group. I think maybe about 50% of those surveyed was arable farmers.
Cool. I've got a few questions about, is there any chance of having amateur entomologists or enthusiasts to help farmers and monitor as volunteers at all? And then on the back of that as well, I've got someone who's said that they work with agricultural students and they would like to introduce them into looking at beetles on their farms. And is there a way that they could carry out a simple research project or have any links that you could send them to?
I think this is a way to utilize the area. I really do. I'm always trying to kind of plump for students to get involved. Because one of the great ways, I never thought about doing a PhD until I came and worked with Rothamsted and did a visit and saw how the scientists could work in this way. So getting students to come and work with us, we do have student placements that we run at Rothamsted, but also getting them to work more directly with the farmers would be great, because farmers, like I showed you, they don't have the time or the training to carry out these surveys. If we could get a great network of volunteers to go out on farmland and do this, it would be fantastic if we could arrange that. I'd be very interested in anyone contacting me about ways to do that. Hope that answers it.
Yeah, I feel like that more than does that. I've got a few questions on dung beetles. I know you specialize on carabids, but I'm fairly certain you're okay with them. Are you okay?
Not much with the ID lately.
Okay,
I only got a few species on my undergrad, but
I'll try these questions, and if not, I think I know the answers anyway. But we'll go for it. So, has there been any research done on anthelmintics, i.e., livestock wormers, affecting dung beetles? Do you know of any?
Yes. So I did quite a bit on this in my undergraduate, and there are different classes of antihelminths. That one my tongue always trips up on, so I'll just say wormers. So there's different classes of wormers that can be used, and that resource I showed you, Dung Beetles for Farmers, they will say which ones are the safer ones to use. So different ones are different toxicities, but often farmers worm preventatively. So they'll worm every year, no matter what. And I've talked to farmers who do that because they don't want the worm burden. But using them just when you need them means that the cows, the other cattle, will build up a natural resistance to worms as well. So if you use wormers all the time, you're destroying this natural resistance. But dung beetles actually help with worms as well. So by taking down the worms taking down the dung, they cycle the dung much more quickly. So I had 4 sites that I was working on as an undergraduate, and they used varying kind of degrees of wormers on their sites. And one farmer didn't use wormers at all, and another one was a wildlife trust farm that only used approved wormers. And the speed with which the dung was taken down was days, because I did dung surveys. I went and poked about the beetles in them, and the farms who actually used wormers, there was no dung beetles to cycle it, and the pats could be there for weeks. So it's really startling. So yeah, using wormers not good for the dung beetles. It has been proven the work of Sarah Baignon is very good on that account, and it can persist in the environment too, so that's quite bad. But there's different classes and different ways you can use wormers if you really need to.
I've also whacked some links of literature that's relevant, including some of Sarah's work as well, because she does quite a lot in the UK and that's really relevant. So that's in there. I've got a question from Terry asking why door beetles are found in large numbers on their backs. I can field this one. So
yeah, I always wondered that.
I've got this. I saw that look on your face. Basically, what happens towards the end of their life cycle, their nerves kind of like break down a little bit. So typically, when they emerge and they're all new and fresh, they can flip themselves over quite easily because of their shape and their strong digging legs. But as they get older and their nerve system deteriorates, it means they're unable to sort of manipulate their legs in the same way, and they don't coordinate as well. Bit duddery, basically, and that causes them to get stuck upside down. So that is believed to be the reason that happens. Cool. I think that is it. Yeah, that's it. I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we just want to say a huge thank you, Kelly, for a fascinating talk. It's a little bit different from what we normally have as well, so it's quite good to hear about people for once, because almost too often, I suppose, we're looking with microscopes and hand lenses at these tiny little things, and we forget about their interactions with us as humans. So absolutely fascinating talk.
Welcome, thank you.